Hello, welcome to Washington Talk. I'm Connie Kim. July 27th marks the 67th year since the Korean Armistice Agreement was signed, but tensions still remain on the Korean Peninsula, and North Korea's nuclear ambitions have not diminished. Today, we take a look at the American military presence on the Korean Peninsula and the current state of the U.S.-South Korea alliance. Joining us today is Congressman Bera, House Foreign Affairs Committee's chairman of the Subcommittee on Asia, the Pacific, and Nonproliferation. Also joining us is Congressman Ted Yoho. Congressman Yoho is the lead Republican for the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Asia, the Pacific, and Nonproliferation. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's always good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us on.
So I want to take a look at the region and as an overall, first of all. So right now we continue to see tensions grow between the U.S. and China, and North Korea doesn't show any signs of implementing its denuclearization promise. So as chairman and the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Asia, the Pacific, and Nonproliferation, how would you assess the current situation in the region?
You know, it's going in the wrong direction vis-a-vis China. You know, you saw the closing of the consul here in the United States, and now the Chinese are doing the same today. So we've got to find a dialogue that can help us move past some of these tensions. And then with regards to North Korea, obviously China has to play a role in helping North Korea come back to the table and, you know, find a path forward. So, you know, it's a complicated region right now.
Connie, I think with what's going on in the world with the pandemic, the economic collapse in so many countries, it's just more contention. And with North Korea, you know, they're saying that they're going to do more things. They're going to, you know, give us a surprise and all that. What we need to do is we need to have an agreement of what, how we get a unification going between South Korea and North Korea. And we're here to help facilitate that. And we have to do that and de-escalate what's going on in the world.
So I want to follow up on the China point that you mentioned. There's a lot of attention focused on how the U.S.-China competition is going to be rolled out. As a matter of fact, we saw Republican senators introduce a bill that lay out a strategy competing against China, but they did say that there needs to be cooperation between the two sides on the North Korea issue. So do you think this is going to be possible?
You know, it doesn't look easy today, but that's the reality. You know, we're going to be competitors with China, and competition is not a bad thing. But we know, as do all the countries in the region, including the Republic of Korea, that they'll have to have a cooperative relationship with China. I actually think China could do itself some good if it chose to work with the rest of the world. And, you know, North Korea is going to be a challenge, not just for the Republic of Korea and the United States or Japan, but also for China. So, you know, if North Korea, you know, if there's a change in leadership there, et cetera, so stability in the region is important to everyone.
Congressman Yoho, you had been very critical of voicing your criticism against China. Would you agree with Congressman Bera on this point?
You know, that's going to be in China's hands. North Korea does 90% of their trade with China. There was a UN Security Council unanimous resolution that China is one of the permanent members of that council. They need to come to the table on this. You know, it's been 70 years since the start of the Korean War. It's time to bring peace to that area, and let's focus on economies and moving not just the Korean Peninsula forward, but the whole world forward. And China can have a big role in that if they choose.
Mm-hmm. And I want to zoom in on the Korean Peninsula issues a bit here. So there continues to be speculation of whether there is going to be troop reduction from South Korea. Secretary Esper and Deputy Secretary of State Biegun has dismissed these speculations. But why is there continued concerns about a possible troop reduction from South Korea? Why do you think is the reason?
You know, we've seen President Trump do reductions in Germany. You know, he's talked about it in the past. I think, you know, that's part of the reason why we introduced some of the amendments that we did this past week in the Defense Authorization Act that would make it difficult for the president to reduce troops. And this is not a Democratic or Republican issue. I think Congress is united in saying, you know, having the current troop presence in Korea where it is not just good for security on the peninsula, it supports the U.S. interests as well.
Well, this is something that goes on every year. The Pentagon will talk about this. And what we need to do is have sufficient troop numbers to be a deterrent for anybody that wants to invade South Korea. We're not looking to invade anywhere. I mean, we're looking to build economies, help people out and maintain, the peace in that region. And if the Pentagon, if they say there needs to be troop reductions, then they need to go ahead and do the troop reductions. But it needs to be done in a way that solidifies our alignment and our relationship with South Korea to show that there is no fissure in that, there is no crack in that. And if we do that, things will get along fine. And we just need to come to an agreement on that.
So the NDAA for fiscal year 2020 and 2021, it puts a limit on the reduction of troops from the Korean Peninsula without Congress approval. So are you saying if the Pentagon sees the need for this, so you would agree to this reduction?
Well, again, we've got the separation of powers for a reason in this country. And if the Pentagon and the executive branch said, this is what we want to do, they'll bring that argument to Congress, and then Congress will either support that or not support this. But what we also have to keep in mind is the sentiment of the South Korean, not just the citizens, but of their legislative body, their government. What is a comfortable level for all parties involved to maintain that strong alliance that we have? And that's one of the strongest alliances we have. And, we value that very much. I mean, South Korea is our sixth largest trading partner. And so we want to maintain that. We want to maintain the peace, and we're there to help any way we can on that.
Mm-hmm. So Congressman Yoho had said that if the Pentagon decides that it's necessary to reduce troops in South Korea, depending on U.S. military force deployment across the world, he would be open to that idea. What's your take on this?
Well, we would want the President or the Secretary of Defense to come before Congress and explain to us, what the impact would be of those troop reductions.
Do you mean that you will also be open to possible troop reductions on the Korean Peninsula as well?
I think it's a bad idea at this particular moment in time, but if the Pentagon or the State Department has information, we're always open to hearing what that information is and what their strategy is. But we don't think they should act unilaterally. It's always best on issues of national security for the administration and Congress to be acting together.
Mm-hmm. But in the case of the president's unilateral action, how would you respond?
Again, it's going to be based on what the Pentagon and the experts say, and then we'll have that debate. And of course, South Korea will weigh in on that too. And then when we get that information, then we can make the decision on which is the best thing to do to move forward to maintain. And this is what we always got to do, is focus on what we're trying to maintain. And that's peace and a growing economy in the region.
I remember that you had tweeted saying that it would be irresponsible to be doing this. What kind of action would you take?
I think you would see members of Congress come together and, do things to make it as difficult as possible. That's why we put some of these amendments in the bills that we passed this week that would require the President or the Secretary of Defense to come before Congress and explain why he thought the troop reductions were beneficial. At a time when you see the tensions between the United States and China, my argument to the President would be, now's not the right time to do this because it does weaken our hand in these negotiations.
Are there any concerns that the reduction of the American troops from the Korean Peninsula could be used as a political issue ahead of the elections?
There's always that. In a political season, there's going to be that. What I know with President Trump and the people he's working with, they're looking long term. What is best for this situation, to pass on to future generations. And there's going to be people on the other side of the aisle that will use this and say, well, he doesn't know what he's doing. He's weakening our alliance with South Korea. If we can take politics out of it, and again, it goes back to focusing on what are we trying to accomplish. Let's accomplish that together. And Congress has, especially on the Foreign Affairs Committee, shown how we can work together on issues to move peace and prosperity for all countries forward.
I think national security issues should stay out of politics. Most of us don't see this as a Democratic or Republican issue, and it is a an issue that's in the U.S. interest. So I would hope the president doesn't go there. We don't support the reduction of troops.
Mm-hmm. And I want to step back a little bit and look at the broader issue from Congress in terms of the Korean Peninsula. So you both have been strong supporters of the U.S.-South Korea alliance. We've definitely seen a lot of action when it comes to the U.S.-South Korea alliance in Congress this year. Why do you think this was the reason?
I think we all recognize the importance of the relationship between the United States and the Republic of Korea. They're one of our closest allies. And again, as we touched on earlier, as you see tensions in other parts of Asia, particularly between the United States and China, now's the time for us to bring our friends closer, not further away. So, issues like the burden sharing agreement, those are all issues that we should be moving past. And, again, it's a complicated region. And it's a time when countries that share values of democracy, of free markets, that are modern economies, we have to all stick together, particularly in the midst of this global pandemic.
Well, I got to give Bera, the chairman of the committee, he has done an outstanding job on highlighting this. When you look at the history of our involvement in South Korea, with the invasion of the North, we have spent a lot of blood on all sides to bring peace to that area. We've seen South Korea going from a region that was behind North Korea to our sixth largest trading partner today, a technological giant. We have the same values and we are in lockstep with them. And that has got to be one of the strongest alliances we have, not just militarily, but economically, from agriculture to technology to medicines. And then you bring in the Japanese with that trilateral arrangement. That's one of the strongest alliances in the world. And we can't afford to have a fissure in that, because if there's a fissure in that, that shows weakening. North Korea is going to benefit from that. China's going to benefit from that, possibly Russia and Iran. So this is something that it's paramount to us in Congress, and it's a bipartisan issue in both chambers.
There have been concerns that the U.S. and South Korea may not be on the same page when it comes to inter-Korean cooperation. There is the issue of the ongoing military burden sharing cost negotiations. Are you concerned of a possible weakening of the alliance?
No, I'm not. I mean, there's always going to be differing of opinions. I mean, that's something in any human interaction. And this is something that, with calmer heads prevailing, we're going to work out what's best for that alliance. Again, and it goes back to what are we trying to accomplish? And I think if we do that, yeah, you're going to have these disagreements, but I think in the end, you'll have a final product that's very good, that benefits all.
There are things that we have to get past. We would urge the Trump administration to get the burden sharing, the SMA, Special Measures Agreement, concluded. We think it's an agreement that benefits both the United States and the Republic of Korea. It brings security to the region. And we think it's in our interest as well as the Korean interest to get this done.
We definitely hope to see close coordination between the two allies on a wide range of issues like both of you have mentioned. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having us on.
That does it for this week's edition of Washington Talk from Voice of America. This was my last episode hosting Washington Talk, as I'll be departing from the company. Thank you so much for joining us every week. It was a great pleasure. Washington Talk will be back next week. Goodbye.